we interpret our careers so much by just looking backwards, and it's kind of funny in terms of how poorly we estimate the future, and how much like we have what are called herding effects. So there's two things that I'm talking about. So the first one is that there is a myopia in how we understand the future. What does that mean? Myopia is like if you go to a doctor and they tell you have nearsightedness, that's myopia. And it's this idea that we can't really forecast very far into the future. I wish we could. We're really terrible at it. Even when there is like obvious patterns that are existing. And whenever somebody tells you what the future probably will look like based on these patterns, we don't believe it and we think it's insane. Um, so the other thing is that we have herding effects. What are herding effects? Is this general idea that we tend to, if there's a little bit of information that's available that gives a competitive advantage, or that looks like it's not necessarily gives a competitive advantage. It could be like it just looks like you might perform better and it's publicly available. Um, and people think it's kind of like this like little cheat code thing that goes on. And we think like, oh, this is the one reason that everybody is sort of successful by doing this one particular thing. And this is how we do it. We all heard in this direction. It's actually really kind of funny when you start thinking about it, because I've been seeing that so much with things like in technology, right? So you might be like on, social media or, um, platforms was big. Now AI is really big. I see that a lot in my career, that there's definitely these effects that are going on. And there are these moments where everybody's interested in particular things. And say 5 years ago, if you were actually interested in it, you would have been highly discounted, like extraordinarily discounted. Or if you were, um, so I was interested in doing reinforcement learning for a long time. Um, and reinforcement learning, if you look at it, it's just a bunch of math. It often is just math that's like mimicking. And so there's this like real good book that a lot of people read. Um, Barton and Sutton. It's just about reinforcement learning. And it was like really esoteric. When I tell people about this, like years ago, it was only just a couple of people that were interested in this. And now today, because of the change of AI, everybody and their monkey are interested in, how this stuff actually works. They sort of everybody's an expert. Um, and it's actually pretty ironic if you look at this across the board in terms of this herding behavior that goes on, because this was highly predicted that this was going to occur. If you look at, there's a great person, Ray Kurzweil. He's a futurist, but he's a futurist and actually follows. There's this law that's called Moore's law, and it's just basically like what Moore's law was. I think he was the engineer, founder of Intel. Just basically said that computing power is doubling at an exponential rate. And if you looked at it and you looked at its predictions I remember reading it in my undergrad, so it was 2003, and being like, what the hell? But it was really fascinating. It was really interesting. But it was like off the charts in terms of like, this is crazy rockers. Somebody's just like really not there. Like this person is really weird. And if you follow the path of all of the predictions that he had, was just like this kind of nice little curve. We're on the path of everything that this guy predicted, if not faster than what the prediction actually was for much of the things that we've seen today. And yes, how it might be loosely described is not quite the same thing as what it is to experience it. But name somebody that can't remove their, cell phone from their hand, right? Like, we are absolutely tapped in to the sort of digital technology. Name somebody that is drawing upon just their memory at any given moment. None of us do this. It's always like, "Oh, just go ask Google." All of this was highly predicted. It doesn't feel like that's the thing you have to remember. It doesn't feel like the way that the prediction is, but it was very much predicted. And there's these patterns that exist that are very tried and true. They're not fancy when you look at them. You're like, oh, this is just a kind of a boring graph, but they're tried and true. And we know that this actually works. That's why I'm not a big believer in things like betting on a stock, for example, a single stock, is because there's no tried and true pattern behind it. But if you bet on the growth of the economy, the strength of, the American economy, there's hiccups at any given moment. There's different leaders that come in at any given moment, and you're like, oh my gosh. But there is a tried and true to it in aggregate that allows us to have some predictability with what we're actually doing. And I don't like to gamble. I don't like to bet on any given thing too much other than the whole reciprocity project is the only thing I'm really betting on, that would be really risky. But all of it, if you start looking at it, it's just patterns that you're following. Like, the whole thing is just patterns. And we're really bad at seeing these patterns in the future, we're really myopic because we want to know how we are uncertain all the time, right? Like, I deal in this land of uncertainty all of the time because it's my career. But most people find it very difficult. In fact, when you go into the career, you find out in the research and development career, a lot of people just it's not for them because it's so uncertain and it's so nerve wracking. Um, so what I'm getting at is just remember that herding effects are real, that you will see hype cycles, what people call are hype cycles that happen. But basically, it's just this basic pattern. We're all highly and we can't forecast the future very much. We don't like the uncertainty. There's lots of behavioral research that sort of suggests that we don't like uncertainty, and we like the same old, same old. And so we tend to gravitate to what is already tried and true. Um, and we tend to want the same old every day. But that doesn't mean that our world is not changing. And that doesn't mean that there's not bigger forces that are very difficult to explain. And I'm not a technological determinist, is what people say. Like, everything's determined by technology. But there are big, large patterns that play out that change the way that we view the world. And all of us, including me, are extraordinarily difficult at predicting the future. And we're extraordinarily difficult at wanting to predict the future. All right, take care and have a wonderful day.